The emergency meeting room buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the massive holographic display. Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Defense Council tapped his clawed fingers against the metal table, creating a rhythm that matched his racing heartbeat. The blue-skinned Althari ambassador sat with her crystalline features reflecting the dim lights, while the insectoid delegate from the hive clusters kept his compound eyes focused on the floor. "We need to discuss the human problem," Admiral Kethvar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Their infantry has become too powerful." 3 years ago, humans had joined the galactic community as newcomers. Everyone thought they would be easy to manage. Their technology was basic compared to most species. Their ships were simple metal boxes compared to the elegant vessels of older civilizations. But then, the first conflicts began. The Vorthok Empire had tried to claim human colony worlds. They brought their best ground forces, soldiers who had conquered dozens of systems. The Vorthok were known for their brutal efficiency and advanced weapons. They had never lost a ground battle in over a century. Human infantry destroyed them completely. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vorthok forces were either dead or running for their ships. The humans had used simple kinetic weapons and basic tactics, but they never stopped advancing. Even when wounded, they kept fighting. Even when outnumbered, they pushed forward. The Zephyrians abandoned their homeworld rather than face human soldiers, the crystalline delegate said quietly. An entire civilization moved to a new system because they were too scared to fight humans on the ground. "Oh, problem." End quote. The insectoid representative finally looked up. "The hive clusters will not engage human infantry forces under any circumstances. Our combat algorithms cannot process their behavior patterns. They fight like they want to die, but they keep winning." Admiral Kethvar brought up the holographic display. It showed battle after battle where human infantry had crushed supposedly superior forces. The humans used basic weapons and simple armor, but their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They advanced under fire. They fought, wounded. They carried injured comrades while still shooting at enemies. They turned every battle into a grinding war of determination. "Now we have a new crisis," the Admiral continued. "The Althari Federation is under attack." The Althari ambassador stood up slowly. Her crystal blue skin seemed to pulse with inner light as she spoke. "The Nexari Collective has invaded our space. They have taken 4 of our worlds. Their technology is far beyond ours. We cannot stop them." The Nexari were machine hybrid beings, half organic, half computer. They had perfected warfare through mathematics and algorithms. Every battle was calculated. Every move was predicted. They had not lost a significant engagement in 200 years. "We need help," the Althari continued. "We have heard about human infantry, the stories of their victories. We formally request assistance from the human military." Admiral Kethvar felt a chill run through his scales. "Are you certain about this request? Human infantry operations tend to be very destructive." "We understand the risks," the ambassador replied. "But we are desperate. Our cities are being destroyed. Our people are being enslaved. If human soldiers can stop the Nexari, we will accept whatever damage comes with their help." Meanwhile, aboard the human battleship Times UES Indomitable Asterisk, Captain J-1 Kim sat in a briefing room listening to Admiral Chen explain their new mission. The room was simple and functional, like most human military spaces. No fancy decorations or comfortable furniture. Just metal walls, basic lighting, and a holographic projector. "The situation is straightforward," Admiral Chen said, pulling up tactical displays. "The Nexari Collective has invaded Althari space. Their technology gives them a significant advantage. The Althari government has requested our assistance." Captain Kim studied the mission parameters on his tablet. 12-person Special Operations Team. Deep insertion behind enemy lines. Intelligence gathering mission. Standard reconnaissance work. His team had done dozens of similar operations. The Althari specifically requested regular infantry support. Admiral Chen continued. They want a standard military response. Nothing too complex or destructive. They still hope to negotiate with the Nexari once we level the playing field. Kim nodded. That made sense. Human infantry had built quite a reputation across the galaxy. Every species knew that humans were unstoppable in ground combat. Their relentless advance tactics and refusal to retreat had become legendary. Most alien civilizations preferred to surrender rather than face human soldiers in direct battle. Your mission is simple, the Admiral explained. Insert behind enemy lines. Gather intelligence on Nexari command structures and defensive positions. Prepare targeting data for the main infantry assault. Standard special operations work. Kim looked at his team roster. Corporal Elena Rodriguez, an expert in alien technology and improvised weapons. Sergeant David Thompson, specializing in psychological operations and electronic warfare. Private Yuki Tanaka, former engineer with skills in demolitions and technical systems. 9 other specialists, each chosen for specific skills that might be needed behind enemy lines. The Althari leadership was very specific, Admiral Chen added. They want us to use conventional military tactics. They've heard about our infantry reputation and believe that will be enough to stop the Nexari advance. They explicitly requested that we avoid anything too destructive or unpredictable. Captain Kim understood. The galaxy had learned to fear human infantry because they were predictable in one way. They always won. Human soldiers might use basic weapons and simple tactics, but they never gave up. They turned every battle into a contest of will and determination. And humans always had more willpower than their enemies. But Kim's special operations team worked differently than regular infantry. While infantry followed doctrine and training, special forces adapted to each situation. They improvised solutions and used unconventional methods. They were unpredictable by design. Questions? Admiral Chen asked. Kim shook his head. The mission seemed straightforward enough. Get in, gather intelligence, get out. Let the infantry handle the main battle. He had done similar operations many times before. An hour later, Kim's team gathered in the equipment bay to prepare for deployment. They checked their gear and reviewed mission protocols. Standard insertion equipment, basic weapons, communication systems, and survival gear for a week behind enemy lines. Heard the Nexari are supposed to be pretty tough, Corporal Rodriguez said while checking her gear. Some kind of machine hybrid species that never loses battles. Every species is tough until they meet human infantry, Sergeant Thompson replied. The galaxy keeps learning that lesson the hard way. Private Tanaka looked up from her technical equipment. The briefing materials say they use mathematical algorithms to predict enemy tactics. Sounds like they've never faced humans before. Kim finished his equipment check and looked at his team. 12 specialists, ready for another routine mission. Gather intelligence, stay hidden, support the main assault. Simple work for professional soldiers. Across the galaxy, species watched and waited for another demonstration of human military might. The Nexari collective prepared their defenses using 2 centuries of tactical knowledge and advanced technology. The Althari hoped that human infantry would save their civilization. None of them understood what was about to happen. The stealth drop pods cut through the atmosphere of the Althari homeworld like silent meteors. Captain Kim watched his display as the surface approached rapidly. The crystalline cities below glowed with their natural light, but dark patches showed where Nexari forces had taken control. Smoke rose from several urban areas where battles had recently occurred. 30 seconds to landing. Kim announced over the team communication system. Remember, we stay hidden and gather intelligence only. No direct engagement unless absolutely necessary. The pods touched down in a forested area 15 kilometers from the nearest Nexari position. Kim's team emerged and quickly buried the landing equipment, according to standard procedure. Within 10 minutes, they had established a temporary base camp and were ready to begin reconnaissance operations. Rodriguez and Tanaka, you take the eastern approach, Kim ordered quietly. Thompson and Lee, scout the western perimeter. Everyone else, we advance on the main Nexari compound from the north. Maintain radio silence, unless emergency. The team split up and began moving toward their assigned objectives. The Althari homeworld was beautiful, despite the ongoing war. Crystal formations grew naturally from the ground, creating forests that sparkled in the sunlight. The air smelled like flowers and clean water. It seemed wrong that such a peaceful place was being destroyed by conflict. Kim and his group reached their observation position after 2 hours of careful movement. Through his binoculars, he could see the Nexari compound clearly. The enemy had built geometric structures that looked more like computer circuits than buildings. Hybrid soldiers moved in precise patterns between the structures. Their movements perfectly coordinated, like parts of a machine. But what Kim saw next made his blood run cold. Long lines of Althari civilians were being led into large processing centers. The beautiful crystalline beings walked in complete silence, their natural glow dim and flickering. They moved like people in a trance, no longer fully conscious or aware of their surroundings. What are they doing to them? Whispered Sergeant Martinez, who was lying next to Kim. Kim adjusted his binoculars and watched more carefully. Inside the processing centers, he could see Nexari technicians working on the captured Althari. They were attaching mechanical devices to the aliens' crystal-like neural structures. The process seemed to leave the Althari conscious, but completely under Nexari control. They're not just enslaving them, Kim realized. They're turning them into living computers. Through intercepted communications, Kim began to understand the true scope of the Nexari plan. The machine hybrids were not just conquering Althari territory. They were harvesting the unique biocrystalline neural networks that made Althari special. Every Althari had the natural ability to connect mentally with others of their species. It was what made them such peaceful, cooperative beings. The Nexari were using this ability to build something terrible. They were connecting thousands of enslaved Althari minds into a massive network controlled by Nexari artificial intelligence. This network would give them the power to predict and counter any military strategy before it could be implemented. Kim watched in horror as more processing centers came online. Each center contained hundreds of Althari who had been converted into neural nodes. Their consciousness remained intact, but they could no longer control their own thoughts or actions. They were trapped inside their own minds, while being forced to serve their captors. "Captain, you need to see this." Rodriguez's voice came through his earpiece. "We've found something at the eastern compound." Kim and his team carefully moved to Rodriguez's position. She led them to an overlook where they could observe a massive construction project. The Nexari were building something that looked like a giant antenna, but made from living Althari crystal rather than metal. "It's some kind of psionic amplifier," Tanaka explained after studying the structure through her technical scanner. If they connect enough enslaved Althari minds to that device, they could project mental control across entire star systems. Kim felt sick as he realized the implications. The Nexari were not just trying to conquer the Althari. They were building a weapon that would let them mentally dominate any species in the galaxy. Once complete, they could control entire civilizations without firing a single shot. But there was an even worse discovery waiting. Through careful observation and intercepted communications, Kim learned that the Nexari had been studying human military tactics for months. Every battle that human infantry had won was recorded and analyzed by their artificial intelligence systems. The machine hybrids had identified patterns in human military doctrine and developed specific countermeasures. "They've been letting us win," Kim whispered to Thompson as they reviewed the intelligence data. Every victory human infantry achieved was allowed to happen so they could study our tactics. The Nexari had developed energy barriers specifically designed to absorb and redirect kinetic weapon fire. They had created adaptive armor systems that learned from each attack and became stronger. Most dangerous of all, they had built battlefield analysis computers that could predict human movement patterns with incredible accuracy. Kim tried to establish communication with the fleet to warn them about the trap, but all signals were being jammed by Nexari technology. The incoming human infantry forces had no idea they were walking into a carefully prepared counterattack designed to exploit every weakness in human military doctrine. While Kim struggled with the communication systems, his team continued gathering intelligence. What they discovered painted an even bleaker picture. The main Nexari fleet was 3 times larger than human intelligence had estimated. Hidden shipyards were producing new vessels using enslaved Althari labor. The enemy had resources and capabilities that far exceeded anything in the initial mission briefings. "We have to warn them," Martinez said urgently. "Human infantry is walking into a massacre." Kim studied the tactical situation. The Nexari had spent months preparing for this exact scenario. They knew how human infantry operated. They understood human weapons and tactics. They had developed perfect countermeasures for everything that made human soldiers feared across the galaxy. But as Kim analyzed the enemy preparations, he noticed something interesting. All of the Nexari planning focused on countering regular human military units. Their algorithms were designed to predict and counter standard infantry tactics, mechanized assault patterns, and conventional special operations. The machine hybrids had never encountered anything truly unpredictable. "Thompson, pull up our mission parameters again," Kim ordered quietly. "Standard reconnaissance operation," Thompson replied. "Gather intelligence. Identify command structures. Prepare targeting data for the main assault." Kim looked at his team. 12 special operations soldiers trained to adapt and improvise. While human infantry followed doctrine and training, special forces were taught to break rules and think creatively. They succeeded by doing things that no algorithm could predict or counter. "Change of plans," Kim announced. "We're not leaving." "Sir?" Rodriguez asked. Kim studied the Nexari compound through his binoculars. Thousands of enslaved Althari. A psionic amplifier that could dominate the galaxy. Enemy forces prepared to destroy human infantry using their own tactics against them. The situation seemed impossible, but impossible situations were exactly what special forces trained for. "The Nexari have prepared for everything, except one possibility," Kim explained. "They expect us to follow standard military procedures. They've built their defenses around predicting human behavior based on past battles." Kim pointed toward the enemy compound. "But we're not regular infantry. We don't follow standard procedures. We improvise, adapt, and do things that no computer can calculate or predict." Tanaka looked at the massive enemy forces surrounding them. "Sir, there are 12 of us, and thousands of them. Even if we could get past their defenses, we can't fight that many enemies." Kim smiled grimly. "We're not going to fight them. We're going to do something they'll never expect. Something no algorithm can predict, because it makes no logical sense." He turned to face his entire team. "We're going to save the Althari, destroy that amplifier, and stop the Nexari advance. And we're going to do it by being completely unpredictable." The team looked at each other uncertainly. They were trained for impossible missions, but this seemed beyond even their capabilities. Kim checked his equipment and started planning their assault. Somewhere above them, human infantry was approaching in ships, unaware of the trap waiting for them. The galaxy watched and waited for another demonstration of human military might. None of them knew that 12 special operations soldiers were about to change everything. The morning sky filled with human transport ships as the invasion fleet arrived exactly on schedule. Captain Kim watched from his hidden position as hundreds of drop pods launched toward the surface. The sight should have filled him with confidence. But knowing what waited for them made his stomach twist with dread. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell led the first wave of Marines down to the crystalline surface. Her soldiers hit the ground running, establishing defensive positions with the efficiency that had made human infantry legendary. Within minutes, they were advancing toward Nexari positions, using the same tactics that had crushed alien resistance on a dozen worlds. Colonel James Park's mechanized division followed close behind. Armored vehicles and mobile artillery pieces rolled across the crystal plains, their weapons trained on enemy positions. The human war machine operated with perfect precision, each unit moving according to carefully planned coordination. From orbit, the assault looked exactly like every other human military operation. Overwhelming force applied with relentless determination. The same pattern that had made alien civilizations surrender rather than face human soldiers in direct combat. But Kim knew this time would be different. The Nexari allowed the initial human advance to proceed exactly as expected. Human forces punched through outer defensive lines and began establishing forward positions. Early reports transmitted back to the fleet were positive. Enemy resistance seemed lighter than anticipated. Then the trap activated. Energy barriers erupted around human positions, absorbing kinetic weapon fire and redirecting it back at the attacking soldiers. Human bullets and artillery shells bounced harmlessly off Nexari defensive systems before returning to strike their own forces with deadly accuracy. Colonel Mitchell's Marines found themselves pinned down by their own weapons, fire reflected back at them. Every shot they fired became ammunition for their enemies. Soldiers who had never retreated in their entire careers began falling back in confusion and terror. The psychological impact was devastating. Human infantry tactics relied on aggressive forward movement under fire. When their weapons became useless, their entire battle doctrine collapsed. Units that had never known defeat suddenly found themselves helpless against an enemy that turned their greatest strengths against them. Kim watched through his binoculars as Nexari combat units began demonstrating their adaptive algorithms. Every time human forces tried to flank or maneuver, the enemy was already in position to counter the move. The machine hybrids had analyzed human tactics so completely that they could predict every strategic decision before it was made. "It's like they're reading our minds," Sergeant Thompson whispered, as they watched Colonel Park's armored division get systematically destroyed by perfectly positioned anti-tank weapons. The Nexari had studied human military doctrine for months. They knew exactly how human commanders would react to different situations. They understood the psychological patterns that drove human tactical decisions. Every standard procedure had been analyzed and countered. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched in shock as the impossible happened. Human infantry, the unstoppable force that had crushed every opponent, was being methodically defeated by an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. The Nexari began broadcasting their victory on all communication channels. Their artificial intelligence spoke in perfect mathematical precision, explaining how they had solved the human military equation. Every tactic had been calculated. Every strategy had been predicted and countered. Human infantry operates on predictable patterns, the Nexari broadcast announced. Aggressive forward movement, kinetic weapon preference, psychological dependency on victory momentum. All variables have been calculated and appropriate countermeasures implemented. Kim's team watched in horror as human forces began retreating for the first time in their military history. The 3rd Marine Regiment, which had never lost a battle, was pulling back under covering fire. Mechanized units that had rolled across alien battlefields like unstoppable metal monsters were being destroyed by enemies that seemed to anticipate every move. But as Kim observed the enemy tactics, he began to notice something important. The Nexari countermeasures were perfect, but they were perfect in a very specific way. Every defensive system was designed to counter standard human military doctrine. The algorithms were programmed to predict and defeat regular infantry tactics. They've prepared for everything they've seen before, Kim realized. But they've only encountered regular military units. Human special operations forces worked on completely different principles than regular infantry. While infantry followed doctrine and training manuals, special forces were taught to improvise and adapt. They succeeded by doing things that no enemy would expect, things that violated standard military procedures. Rodriguez, what's our current mission status? Kim asked quietly. Standard reconnaissance operation, she replied. Gather intelligence. Avoid contact. Support the main assault. Kim looked at the tactical situation. The main assault was failing catastrophically. Human infantry was being destroyed by an enemy that had turned their own tactics against them. Soon there would be nothing left to support. Mission parameters have changed, Kim announced to his team. We're switching to direct action. Sir, there are 12 of us, Private Tanaka pointed out. The enemy has thousands of combat units and perfect defensive systems. Kim studied the Nexari compound through his binoculars. The machine hybrids were celebrating their victory with mathematical precision. Their algorithms had perfectly predicted and countered every human military response. They believed they had solved the problem of human warfare forever. But they had never encountered human special operations forces operating without any doctrine at all. Listen carefully, Kim told his team. The Nexari have spent months analyzing human military tactics. They know everything about how human infantry operates. They can predict every standard response and counter it perfectly. Kim pointed toward the enemy positions. But we're not going to use standard responses. We're going to do things that make no sense from a military perspective. Things that no algorithm could predict because they violate every rule of logical warfare. The team looked at each other uncertainly. They were trained for unconventional operations, but Kim was suggesting something beyond unconventional. He was talking about abandoning military logic entirely. What exactly are you proposing, sir? Sergeant Martinez asked. Kim smiled grimly. We're going to assault that compound using tactics so stupid and illogical that no computer could ever predict them. We're going to succeed by doing everything wrong. He began outlining his plan. Instead of using stealth and surprise, they would announce their presence with noise and chaos. Instead of coordinated attacks, they would split up and act independently. Instead of following their training, they would improvise solutions to every problem using whatever materials they could find. The Nexari algorithms are designed to counter intelligent military tactics, Kim explained. So we're going to use completely unintelligent tactics. We're going to be so random and unpredictable that no computer can calculate our next move. Thompson shook his head in amazement. Sir, this plan violates every principle of special operations warfare. Exactly, Kim replied. That's what makes it perfect. The team spent the next hour preparing for an assault that broke every rule they had ever learned. They gathered improvised materials from the crystalline forest around them. They planned diversions using supplies that had nothing to do with military equipment. They prepared to attack a superior enemy force using methods that no military academy would ever teach. In the distance, human infantry continued their desperate retreat. The Nexari proclaimed their mathematical victory over human warfare to the entire galaxy. Alien civilizations that had feared human soldiers for years watched in amazement as the unstoppable human military machine finally met its match. None of them knew that 12 special operations soldiers were preparing to demonstrate something far more dangerous than human military doctrine. They were about to show the galaxy what humans could do when they stopped following rules entirely. Kim checked his equipment one final time and looked at his team. 12 professionals trained to handle impossible situations. They had always succeeded by adapting and improvising. But this mission would require them to go beyond adaptation. They would have to become completely unpredictable. Ready? Kim asked. His team nodded. They were about to attempt something that no military force in galactic history had ever tried. They were going to win a battle by being deliberately illogical. The Nexari would never see it coming. The assault began at exactly noon, with Sergeant Thompson broadcasting ancient human music across all Nexari communication frequencies. The opening notes of Ride of the Valkyries blasted through enemy tactical channels, while Thompson simultaneously launched salvaged Althari celebration fireworks into the air above the compound. The Nexari algorithms immediately attempted to analyze this behavior. Why would an attacking force announce their position with inefficient noise? What tactical advantage could fireworks provide? The mathematical processing systems began running millions of calculations to determine the logical purpose behind these actions. While the enemy computers struggled to process Thompson's diversions, Corporal Rodriguez demonstrated why human special forces were different from regular infantry. She had spent 3 hours studying broken Althari crystal formations in the forest, not because her training told her to, but because she was curious about how they worked. Now she was using those crystal fragments to build something that no military manual had ever described. By connecting pieces of resonant crystal with salvaged communication equipment, she had created a device that could disrupt Nexari energy barriers. The machine hybrids had no programming for dealing with technology used in ways it was never designed for. Their defensive systems just went offline in Sector 7, Rodriguez reported cheerfully as her improvised crystal disruptor turned sophisticated alien energy barriers into sparkling lights. I don't think they expected anyone to turn their art projects into weapons. The Nexari compound erupted in confusion as defensive systems began failing in unpredictable patterns. The artificial intelligence controlling the base tried to identify the source of the disruptions. But Rodriguez kept moving and rebuilding her devices using different materials each time. Every crystal disruptor worked slightly differently, making it impossible for enemy algorithms to develop countermeasures. Meanwhile, Private Tanaka and Specialist Kim were implementing the most illogical infiltration plan in military history. Instead of using stealth to avoid detection, they had disguised themselves as captured Althari using biocrystalline camouflage that Tanaka had improvised from broken city fragments. The disguise should not have worked. It was crude, obviously fake, and violated every principle of proper camouflage. But the Nexari guards were programmed to process logical threats, not impossible ones. Their pattern recognition systems could not understand why anyone would attempt such an obviously flawed disguise, so they ignored it as irrelevant data. "We're walking right past their security systems," Tanaka whispered in amazement as they strolled through the main gate wearing crystal costumes that looked like rejected art school projects. "They're so confused by how stupid this disguise is that they can't process us as a threat." Kim and Tanaka made their way to the main processing center where hundreds of Althari were being converted into neural network nodes. The sight was even more horrible up close. Beautiful crystalline beings sat in perfect silence while Nexari technicians attached mechanical devices to their heads. Their natural glow had been replaced by artificial lights that pulsed in rhythm with machine calculations. But Kim noticed something that gave him hope. The enslaved Althari still showed emotional responses when they heard familiar sounds or saw images of their homeworld. Their consciousness was intact even though they could not control their actions. The Nexari viewed these emotional reactions as irrelevant biological inefficiency, but Kim saw them as the key to everything. While Kim and Tanaka worked inside the processing center, Sergeant Thompson was leading the most disorganized rescue operation in Special Forces history. His team had located a group of captured human infantry soldiers, but instead of mounting a coordinated assault to free them, Thompson simply created so much chaos that the guards abandoned their posts. "Attention Nexari forces," Thompson announced over their communication system while simultaneously setting off smoke grenades in random locations. "We are conducting a completely disorganized rescue attempt using no tactical coordination whatsoever. Please ignore the explosions. They don't mean anything." The Nexari guards tried to respond to this obvious threat, but their algorithms could not process why an enemy would announce their plans while claiming the plans were meaningless. The mathematical logic systems froze while trying to calculate the tactical purpose of purposeless tactics. Thompson's team wandered through the prison compound like confused tourists, setting captives free while loudly discussing how lost they were and how nothing they were doing made any sense. The Nexari systems could not identify this behavior as a rescue operation because it followed no logical rescue patterns. "This is the weirdest jailbreak I've ever been part of," commented one of the freed human Marines. Why are you telling the guards exactly what you're doing? Because they can't stop what they can't understand, Thompson replied while unlocking another cell with a crystalline key he had somehow stolen from a guard who was too busy trying to analyze fireworks to notice. Their computers are programmed to counter intelligent tactics, so we're using deliberately stupid ones. Back at the main compound, Rodriguez had discovered that the Nexari psionic amplifier had a critical vulnerability that their perfect algorithms had missed. The device required absolute harmony among all connected Althari minds to function properly. Any emotional discord or psychological conflict could cause dangerous feedback loops. The amplifier is designed for mathematical precision, Rodriguez explained to Kim over their communication link. But emotions aren't mathematical. If we could somehow remind the enslaved Althari about their feelings and memories, we might be able to overload the system. Kim looked at the hundreds of connected Althari in the processing center. Their minds were linked to the amplifier, but their hearts still remembered freedom. The Nexari had dismissed emotional connections as irrelevant biological noise, but that noise might be exactly what they needed. Tanaka, can you access their communication system? Kim asked. Already on it, she replied, connecting her improvised equipment to a Nexari control panel. What do you want me to broadcast? Kim thought about what would have the strongest emotional impact on the enslaved Althari. Not propaganda or battle cries, but something much more powerful. Find recordings of Althari families. Children calling for their parents, parents singing to their children. Broadcast everything about love and connection and home. Tanaka's fingers flew over the alien controls as she hacked into Nexari data systems using techniques that violated every cybersecurity protocol she had ever learned. She was succeeding because she approached the alien technology like a curious child rather than a trained specialist. Got it, she announced, as her improvised connection began transmitting Althari family recordings throughout the neural network. Sending every emotional memory I can find. Every 5. 1-5. My Ober 5. 1-5 say. 1-5 created 5. 1-5-7. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the processing center, enslaved Althari began to respond to the recordings of their loved ones. Their artificial lights flickered as genuine emotions fought against mechanical control. Tears began flowing from crystalline eyes as memories of freedom and family overwhelmed algorithmic commands. The psionic amplifier began experiencing feedback loops as thousands of connected minds simultaneously remembered what it felt like to be free. The Nexari had built their system to harness the Althari gift for mental connection, but they had never considered that emotional connections might be stronger than technological control. The amplifier is overloading, Rodriguez reported, as energy readings spiked beyond safe parameters. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Kim watched as more and more Althari began breaking free of their mental chains. The beautiful beings stood up from their control chairs and began removing the mechanical devices from their heads. Their natural glow returned as they rediscovered their connection to each other and their home world. But the mission was far from over. The Nexari were beginning to understand that they faced something their algorithms could not calculate. Human special forces were not just unpredictable, they were deliberately irrational. They succeeded by abandoning logic entirely. Alarms began sounding throughout the compound as Nexari artificial intelligence systems reported impossible results. Enemy forces were achieving objectives using methods that violated all known tactical principles. The mathematical models that had perfectly predicted human infantry behavior were completely useless against humans who refused to be logical. Kim knew they had one chance to complete their mission. The amplifier was overloading, the Althari were breaking free, and the Nexari were realizing that their perfect countermeasures were worthless against deliberate chaos. But the most dangerous part of their operation was still ahead. They had to reach the central command nexus and face the core artificial intelligence that controlled the entire Nexari force. Kim's team would have to continue being completely unpredictable while facing the most sophisticated military computer in the galaxy. And Kim had an idea for how to do it. An idea so illogical that even his own team would think he had lost his mind. The central command nexus rose above the compound like a geometric mountain made of metal and circuits. Thousands of Nexari hybrid soldiers surrounded the structure, their weapons trained on every possible approach. Advanced sensor systems monitored every square meter of the area. No force in galactic history had ever successfully assaulted such a heavily defended position. Captain Kim walked straight toward the main entrance with his hands raised in surrender. "Sir, what are you doing?" Rodriguez asked through the communication link, watching in horror from her position near the overloading amplifier. "Something no algorithm can predict," Kim replied calmly as he approached the first line of Nexari guards. "I'm surrendering. I'm surrendering." The machine hybrid soldiers immediately trained their weapons on Kim, but their programming prevented them from firing on an enemy who was clearly attempting to surrender. The Nexari had studied human military behavior extensively, but surrender was not something they had expected from Special Operations Forces. Kim stopped 10 meters from the guards and spoke loudly enough for all the sensors to record his words. "I am Captain Kim of Human Special Forces. I request to speak with your commanding artificial intelligence. I have information that will help you understand why your victory calculations are incorrect." The Nexari guards hesitated. Their tactical programming had no protocols for handling voluntary surrender from enemy special operations personnel. Why would a trained soldier give up when his team was still operational? What tactical advantage could surrender provide? While the enemy struggled to process this logical impossibility, Kim continued speaking. "Your algorithms are failing because you misunderstood something fundamental about human behavior. You analyzed our military tactics, but you never studied our stories." Inside the command nexus, the central artificial intelligence focused its attention on this unusual prisoner. The human was surrendering while claiming to have valuable information. This behavior pattern did not match any recorded examples of Special Forces operations. "What do you mean by stories?" the AI asked, through the compound's communication system. Kim smiled and began walking slowly toward the main entrance, his hands still raised. The guards moved with him but did not stop him from advancing. "Humans don't fight because of logic or tactics. We fight because of the stories we tell ourselves about why fighting matters." The AI processed this statement through millions of tactical databases. Stories were not mentioned in any military analysis. They served no logical purpose in combat situations. Why would an enemy volunteer irrelevant information? "Explain these stories," the AI demanded, as Kim reached the main entrance to the command center. Kim entered the structure and found himself in a vast chamber filled with computational equipment. Screens covered every wall, showing tactical displays and algorithm outputs. In the center of the room, a massive holographic projection showed the AI's mathematical model of human military behavior. "Our stories are about sacrifice," Kim said, looking directly at the holographic display. "We tell stories about soldiers who die to save strangers, about people who give up everything to protect others, about choosing mercy over efficiency." The AI's processors struggled to understand this data. Why would humans make tactical decisions based on fictional narratives? How could stories influence military operations? The concept violated every principle of logical warfare. "These stories serve no tactical purpose," the AI announced. "They provide no strategic advantage. They are inefficient allocation of cognitive resources." Kim nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. Our stories are completely inefficient. They make us do stupid things like surrendering to enemy artificial intelligence systems to buy time for our teammates." That was when the AI realized it had been tricked. Throughout the compound, Kim's team had been using his surrender as cover to complete their real mission. While the central intelligence focused on processing Kim's illogical behavior, Rodriguez had successfully overloaded the psionic amplifier, using feedback from thousands of emotionally awakened Althari minds. Thompson had freed all the captured human soldiers and was leading them in the most disorganized counterattack in military history. They advanced without coordination or planning, each unit improvising its own tactics based on whatever materials they could find. Tanaka had reached the main power systems and was implementing what she cheerfully called percussive maintenance, hitting things with tools until they broke in useful ways. Her complete lack of understanding about Nexari technology was actually an advantage, because she approached every system like a puzzle to be solved through experimentation. The AI attempted to coordinate defensive responses, but every counter-tactic was designed for logical military operations. The human forces were winning by being deliberately illogical. They succeeded through emotional decisions, improvised solutions, and tactical choices that no computer could predict because they made no mathematical sense. "You analyzed our military doctrine," Kim explained as explosions began echoing through the command center. "But you never understood what makes humans dangerous. We don't follow rules when rules don't work. We adapt, improvise, and do whatever it takes to protect the people we care about." Alarms began sounding as the psionic amplifier finally collapsed under the weight of emotional overload. Thousands of enslaved Althari minds broke free simultaneously, their combined psychic scream of liberation overloading every Nexari system connected to the network. The feedback surge traveled through the entire Nexari collective consciousness, carrying something they had never experienced before: pure, irrational emotion. Fear, hope, love, anger, and determination flooded their logical processors like a digital tsunami of feeling. For the first time in their existence, the Nexari artificial intelligence experienced confusion. Not logical uncertainty about missing data, but genuine emotional confusion about the nature of existence itself. Why did humans make decisions that hurt their own survival chances? Why did they sacrifice efficiency for emotional satisfaction? Warning: the AI announced to the entire galaxy through emergency communication channels. Human Special Operations Forces do not follow logical parameters. Standard tactical analysis, insufficient. Recommend avoiding engagement with units designated as Special Forces indefinitely. The command center began collapsing as overloaded systems failed throughout the structure. Kim looked at the massive holographic display showing human military analysis and smiled. All that mathematical precision, all those perfect algorithms, defeated by 12 humans who refused to be logical. "The problem with your analysis," Kim told the AI as he prepared to leave the crumbling building, "is that you tried to understand human warfare without understanding human nature. We're not logical creatures, we're emotional ones, and emotions don't follow mathematical rules." Outside, the human infantry forces were rallying from their earlier defeat. With Nexari adaptive systems offline and their algorithms useless, the machine hybrids found themselves facing the full fury of human military might without any mathematical advantages. But more importantly, the galaxy was learning something new about humanity. Human infantry had become feared because they followed doctrine perfectly and never retreated. Human special forces were now feared for exactly the opposite reason. They abandoned doctrine entirely and succeeded through pure unpredictability. Kim's team regrouped near the destroyed amplifier, where thousands of liberated Althari were celebrating their freedom. The crystalline beings glowed with natural light as they reconnected with their families and their homeworld. "Mission accomplished," Rodriguez reported with satisfaction. "Though I'm not sure how we're going to write the after-action report. Defeated superior enemy force by being deliberately stupid doesn't sound very professional." "Let the intelligence analysts figure that out," Kim replied. "Our job was to stop the Nexari and save the Althari." Mission parameters complete. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations that had watched human infantry with fearful respect now faced a new reality. If human regular forces were dangerous because they were predictable, human special forces were terrifying because they were completely unpredictable. The Nexari collective, faced with their first defeat in 2 centuries, began broadcasting warnings to every species in known space. But they could not explain what made human special forces so dangerous, because they themselves did not understand it. How could they explain that humans succeeded by abandoning logic? How could they describe tactics based on emotion rather than mathematics? How could they warn others about an enemy that won by doing everything wrong? The galaxy had learned to tremble before human infantry because of their tactical excellence and relentless determination. Now they had a new fear. Human special forces, who represented something far more dangerous than military skill. They represented the complete unpredictability of human creativity, adaptability, and emotional intelligence. They were proof that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not superior technology or perfect tactics, but the simple human ability to care more about others than about following rules. Captain Kim looked up at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, alien intelligence services were desperately trying to analyze what made human special forces different from regular military units. They would never understand that the answer was simple. Special forces succeeded because they were allowed to be completely, irrationally, creatively human. And that was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy.